Welcome back, everybody. We're diving into some listener-requested material today about Duchess Satine and the new Mandalorians. I mean, it's fascinating, right?
Oh, absolutely.
These Mandalorians, they're like the opposite of what we think of when we hear Mandalorians, you know?
Yeah.
We picture warriors, armor, fighting. Their whole culture, as I understand it, is like built on combat.
Right. Even their language reflects it. Like every other word is tied to some battle or weapon or conquest.
Yeah, and there's this whole code, the Raisonnaire, right? What's that all about?
It basically lays out like the core tenets of Mandalorian society. Emphasizes things like combat prowess, loyalty to your clan, raising your kids in the Mandalorian way.
But those are like guidelines, right? Not just for like warriors, but like all Mandalorians?
Yeah, it's deeply ingrained in their psyche. It's not just a set of rules. It's who they are. It's how they see the world.
And yet, from these ashes of war, we get this group that completely flips the script. The new Mandalorians, they're all about peace. How did this even happen?
Well, I think the Mandalorian Civil War was like a major turning point. The devastation was so profound that it caused like a faction to emerge that completely rejected their violent past. And that's where the new Mandalorians come in.
I'm leading them. We have Duchess Satine Kryze. I mean, a Mandalorian leader who advocates for peace. That's just mind-blowing. What was her strategy? Did she like tap into some forgotten part of Mandalorian history or philosophy or something?
It's interesting. She didn't really try to reinterpret their warrior past. She didn't try to like find some pacifist thread in their history. Instead, she presented this like radically new vision for Mandalore.
Like what?
Well, she argued that their strength could lie in diplomacy and trade and cultural exchange. She wanted to turn Mandalore into this beacon of peace, like a neutral power in a galaxy that's always at war.
And she succeeded, at least for a time. Under her rule, Mandalore becomes this neutral planet, right?
Yeah.
And this during the Clone Wars. This galaxy-wide war is raging all around them. That must have taken serious guts to stay neutral.
Oh, absolutely. She faced, like, immense pressure from both sides, the Republic and the Separatists, to pick a side.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They wanted them on their side.
And let's not forget the internal opposition, too, right? The traditionalist Mandalorians, they saw this whole pacifist movement as a betrayal, like a sign of weakness.
Like they'd gone soft.
Exactly. So yeah, she was walking a tightrope, enemies on all sides. It's pretty remarkable she held on to power as long as she did.
Yeah, no kidding. Talk about a high-stakes leadership position. And then things go sideways, as they often do in Star Wars, with the arrival of Maul. Now, this isn't just any villain. This is like a cunning strategist with a score to settle. So why Mandalore? What's Maul's game here?
Well, after losing his place in the Sith Order, he was consumed by revenge and this lust for power. And he saw Mandalore, its neutrality, as an opportunity. It was vulnerable. And so he forms this alliance with Death Watch, the very group that opposed Satine.
Wait, Death Watch? The Mandalorian traditionalists, the ones who, like, hated everything Satine stood for.
Exactly. He saw them as a tool to destabilize Mandalore and seize control.
So he's using them.
Oh, totally. He's playing the long game, manipulating their leader Pre-Vizsla, promising him power, but ultimately Maul's goal was to take control himself. He used their anger and resentment to his advantage. Brilliant strategy, if you can call it that, given how ruthless it was.
And this alliance, that leads to the attack on Sundari, right?
Right.
The Mandalorian capital. And, I mean, things really spiral out of control from there.
Yeah, it's a turning point for sure. A tragic one. Maul takes over, imprisons Satine, and that peace that she'd worked so hard to build shattered. Just like that. It's pretty devastating, actually.
And then there's her sister, Bo-Katan. She initially sided with Death Watch, right?
Yeah.
And she ends up helping Satine escape. Talk about a complicated family dynamic.
Bo-Katan she's fascinating. She represents this internal conflict within Mandalore itself. Fiercely loyal to her people, but also willing to break with tradition to protect what she believes in.
So in a last-ditch effort to regain control, Satine reaches out to an old friend, Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, what was their relationship exactly? The sources hint at something more than just friendship.
Yeah, there was a romantic connection between them years ago, a love that was sacrificed for duty, Satine becoming the leader of Mandalore, and Obi-Wan dedicating his life to the Jedi Order. But now, with her world falling apart, she turns to him for help.
And that sets the stage for this confrontation between Obi-Wan and Maul. But it's not just a battle for Mandalore, it's intensely personal.
Oh, yeah. It's a clash of destinies fueled by years of animosity. And it's all complicated by their shared history with Satine. Stakes couldn't be higher.
Okay, so Maul's taken over Mandalore. What now? What happens to Satine and to her dream of a peaceful society? Is it all just gone?
Well, Maul's reign, it's anything but peaceful. It's marked by brutality and these constant power struggles.
Yeah, Mandalorians, they're not exactly known for just, like, lying down and accepting someone else's rule, are they?
Exactly, especially an outsider. Maul's victory, it doesn't erase the internal conflicts. In fact, if anything, it makes them even worse.
So even those who disagreed with Satine's pacifism, they weren't happy with Maul either.
Right. It's like all these factions vying for power, old grudges resurfacing, and just this underlying resentment towards Maul's rule. It's chaos.
So Satine's dream of a peaceful Mandalore, it's gone then, at least for now.
Mm.
But what about the new Mandalorians themselves? They just disappear.
Well, yeah, as like a formal political movement, they're pretty much dismantled. But here's the thing about ideas, right?
Okay,
they don't just vanish, especially when they've taken root in a society.
So even though they're no longer in power, their influence lingers.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a ripple effect. Satine's vision, her commitment to peace, it continues to inspire, and we see this most clearly with Bo-Katan.
Her own sister, who initially sided with Death Watch, now she's like carrying on Satine's legacy.
That's wild. Bo-Katan's story it's so interesting because she represents that complexity within Mandalorian culture. It's not just warriors versus pacifists. There's this deep sense of honor, this desire to protect their people, their culture.
And Bo-Katan is trying to find a way to, like, reconcile these two seemingly opposite ideas.
Exactly. She's trying to find that balance.
So she becomes like a symbol of hope for a different future for Mandalore.
Yeah. I guess you could say she represents a third way. Not clinging to the old ways, but also recognizing that, pacifism has its limits, especially in a galaxy where violence is often the answer.
It makes you wonder, what would have happened if Satine had lived? Could she have achieved lasting peace? Or was she just delaying the inevitable?
That's the million credit question, right? It's something that historians and fans will be debating for years to come. Her story, it makes us examine the very nature of pacifism, especially in a universe like Star Wars, where conflict is so ingrained.
Yeah, it raises questions about how do you achieve peace, when everyone else is fighting.
Right. But Satine's story also reminds us that even in the darkest times, even when things seem impossible, hope persists. That struggle for a better world, a more peaceful future, it's a fight worth having. Even if victory seems like, well, a long shot.
Her story is a reminder that real strength, it's not always about, brute force. It can be about compassion.
Mm-hmm.
It can be about believing in a better future and having the courage to stand up for what you believe in, even when everyone tells you you're wrong.
Mm-hmm. We see that in Satine, right? Her commitment to neutrality, her refusal to get drawn into a war that she believed would only bring more suffering. She stood firm, even when it cost her everything.
Powerful stuff. And a good reminder for all of us, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also that tragic element, right? She fought so hard for peace and it's just ripped away.
Yeah. And it's ironic, isn't it? The very violence she tried to stop, it's ultimately what claims her life and throws Mandalore back into chaos. It's a reminder that peace is fragile, but it also makes you ask, what's next? How does Mandalore move forward after something like that?
We know Maul doesn't rule forever. And Bo-Katan, well, she keeps fighting for Mandalore, even as she deals with, her sister's legacy and all those complexities from their past.
Yeah, the story of Mandalore, it's like the story of Satine herself. It's about resilience. It's about struggling and hoping for a better tomorrow. It's a story that keeps going even after the credits roll.
All right, so we're back, and we're going to take a closer look at some of the specific challenges that Satine faced during her reign. I mean, keeping Mandalore neutral during the Clone Wars, that couldn't have been easy.
Oh, no, not at all.
It's one thing to, declare neutrality, but to actually maintain it when you've got these massive forces, the Republic and the Separatists, pulling you in different directions, that takes some serious skill.
Right, and that's where Satine's leadership really shines. She understood that, actions speak louder than words. She didn't just sit back and hope for the best. She actively defended Mandalore's neutrality, on a galactic stage even.
Yeah, the sources mentioned her appearance before the Galactic Senate. I bet that was intense.
Oh, can you imagine? Standing there in front of all those powerful senators, many of whom, probably saw Mandalore's neutrality as a weakness, like they were just an obstacle to their war effort.
Yeah, and Satine's telling them, nope, we're staying out of it.
Exactly. She argued that Mandalore had suffered enough from conflict that they had earned the right to choose their own path.
And they couldn't just, force Mandalore to join them,
Not
right?
really. I mean, not without risking a major backlash. Mandalorians are proud warriors. Forcing them into a war they didn't want to be a part of, that would backfire big time.
So she had to play this delicate game,
Mm-hmm.
keep both sides happy while staying true to Mandalore's neutrality.
Right, and she did it brilliantly. It's easy to forget with all the lightsaber battles and space battles and Star Wars that there's this whole other level of conflict happening, the political maneuvering, the struggle for power.
Yeah, the political side of Star Wars can get pretty intense.
Oh, for sure. And Satine, she was a master at it. You know, she navigated those treacherous currents of galactic politics. She forged alliances where she could. She resisted pressure from all sides. And she always put the interests of Mandalore first.
But it wasn't just external pressure she had to deal with, right? What about Death Watch? They seemed determined to sabotage her peace initiatives at every turn.
Oh, yeah. They were a constant thorn in her side. They saw her pacifism as weakness, as a betrayal of their warrior heritage, and they were ruthless.
You know, it's interesting. I was reading about the bombing incident they orchestrated. You know, the one where they tried to frame Mandalore for attacking a Republic cruiser?
Oh, yeah. That was a close one.
They were really playing dirty.
They knew that if they could paint Mandalore as a threat, as supporting the Separatists, then the Republic would be forced to act. They wanted to drag Mandalore into the war, kicking and screaming.
It's crazy how far they were willing to go. And this is all happening while Satine is trying to, maintain peace at home, build a new society, and convince her own people that this pacifist path is the right one.
She was fighting battles on multiple fronts. It must have been exhausting.
Totally. And, knowing how it all ends, knowing that Maul eventually takes over and her vision of peace is destroyed,
Yeah.
it kind of adds this layer of tragedy to the whole thing. It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You know it's coming, but you can't do anything to stop it.
I see what you mean. Yeah. There's this sense of inevitability, right? This feeling that no matter how hard she fights, she's doomed to fail.
And yet she never gives up. She never compromises her ideals. And that's what makes her such a compelling character.
She's a fighter. To the very end.
And then there's that whole complicated relationship with Obi-Wan. We talked about their romantic connection earlier. You know, how they met years ago and fell in love, but chose duty over love.
Yeah. And you can really feel that unspoken history between them whenever they interact. It adds this layer of, melancholy to their scenes together.
Especially when he comes to Mandalore to help her. You can sense that there's still something there. That spark hasn't died. And it makes her death, even more tragic.
It's brutal, watching her die in his arms, knowing that he can't save her.
It's one of those moments in Star Wars that just stays with you,
Yeah, it's powerful stuff.
But even in her final moments, she's thinking of others. Her last words are a plea to Obi-Wan to remember Mandalore, to help them find peace.
It shows you what kind of person she was. Selfless to the end.
Yeah. She dedicated her life to Mandalore, to peace. And even though she ultimately failed, her legacy lives on.
Right.
And those who are inspired by her vision. Those who keep fighting for a better future for Mandalore.
Exactly. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from all of this. Satine's story teaches us that fighting for peace, for a better world, is always worth it. Even when it seems impossible.
It's a message we all need to hear, I think, no matter what galaxy you live in.
Couldn't agree more.
Satine Kryze may be gone, but her story, her ideals, her unwavering commitment to peace, that's something that continues to inspire. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the story of Duchess Satine and the new Mandalorians. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the galaxy far, far away.